Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this Tuesday, March 12th. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that and are doing that right now by watching Alaska Weather. So thank you for joining us. As always, we encourage you to keep the number handy, 1-800-472-0391. That's an easy way to do that. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line, weather.gov/Alaska/Anchorage/Juneau/Fairbanks. Easy way to find your information online. One click on the map will get you your local weather information there. Be sure and follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/NWS Anchorage, NWS Juneau, NWS Fairbanks, and you can do the same addresses there, NWS Anchorage or even NWS Alaska, on Twitter for all three of our offices and that whole statewide view. If you can't find what you're looking for on social media, online at our website, or even on the Alaska Weather Information Line, or you'd like to see something different on Alaska weather, if we can do something differently to better serve your needs, no matter what part of Alaska you're in, please let me know. I'm happy to serve you any way I can. Here's a look at what's going on around the state tonight. We are getting ready for weather in southeast. Weather is changing and moving across the Gulf. A lot of activity here in the Gulf of Alaska that you'll see here in just a minute when we check on the maps. But to get prepared for that, a winter storm watch is posted for areas from Juneau and northward and into the central parts of the Panhandle. We're watching for a decent amount of snow. It could be about 6 to 10 inches in some cases as weather is moving in. This would be from Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday night, and it looks like the potential is there for accumulating snow. We do expect to see the potential for some high winds as well, and that would be more for the southern areas here. A high wind watch for Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday night into early Thursday morning for gusts that are approaching 60 miles per hour. And if you're thinking, okay, 60 miles an hour, that's not the worst we've had, you're right. This is not going to be probably the strongest storm that's moved through, but it'll be one that kind of toes the line for, gosh, that's a little bit on the windy side, and well, maybe there goes a shingle, right? So maybe not the worst, but certainly something that could get a little windier than normal and potentially cause damage across southern parts of the Panhandle here. So a high wind watch and a winter storm watch, and we're also going to watch for some gusty winds across the north too. So keep your eyes peeled for more warnings or advisories from the National Weather Service office in Juneau as we go toward tomorrow. It looks like they're still considering some of the information that's coming in and get a better handle on where the models are taking the system in the Gulf and how that applies to you in southeast. So stand by and watch for more information. That's exactly what that winter storm watch means. Time to be prepared. Here's a look at what's going on across the north. The yellow is an advisory level alert. And basically, we're looking at winter weather advisories all the way across the southern Brooks Range, the upper Koyukuk Valley, the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys, as well as the Chukchi Coast. All of these areas are going to experience at least a little bit of wind and maybe a little bit of snow. Not a whole lot of either one of those, but the amount of snow and the amount of wind together could impact your travel conditions, and visibility is expected to be poor when those winds come up. Now, we're not looking for a whole lot of additional snow here around the Chukchi Coast, but as soon as you move inland a little bit more, and especially through the rest of tonight, another inch or two of snow may be possible, and winds may be gusting up to about 40 miles per hour for this entire region. They could be just a little bit stronger here around the Chukchi Coast. All that said, it basically means that we've got a little bit of snow and a little bit of wind coming together, and be careful if you've got to be moving about. Make sure someone knows when you're coming and going, and make sure that you check in when you get there and keep everybody safe. Winter weather advisories again posted for the northern parts of Alaska tonight. Here's a look at the big picture, and you can see the weather pattern we're in. It really hasn't changed a whole lot, but it is changing now. Low pressure across the southern Bering is trying to reposition itself across the western Gulf, and with that, a very deep southerly flow is working up over the Gulf of Alaska and pushing that moisture northward into the interior and across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and that's where that winter weather advisory is again, all the way out toward the Kotzebue Sound region in the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. It's not in southeast yet, and that's why we're only talking about winter storm watches and high wind watches at this point, because we anticipate some of that weather could arrive, but the orientation is going to make a big difference in how that plays out for where you live in southeast. Back to the west side of the storm, that's where the cold air is, and we're watching that take shape. But this orientation is a lot different than what we were talking about last week. Instead of more of a north-south orientation, it's leaning a little bit more to the north and west, and that's dragging in colder air from eastern Asia, but it's not a direct tap of the Chukchi Coast in the upper atmosphere. At the surface, that's a little bit different. Take a look at the loop with me one more time, and you can see that there has been generally pleasant weather across the eastern Gulf. That's coming to an end as the system moves eastward. Drier air is filling in across the western sections of the Yukon, and clouds and moisture are streaming northward once again. We can see that speckled kind of mackerel appearance across the southern Bering. That is colder air, and that's how it looks on the satellite picture when it interacts with moisture. A lot of speckled clouds are showing up in that cumulus field. Across the north, you can see that there's plenty of ice. In some cases, that is clear all the way down to the surface of the water, and ice is filling in slowly and surely as the winds settle down and the colder air moves in across some parts of the northern Bering. A look at the map shows high pressure across regions of the eastern Gulf and south of Haida Gwaii. The low, main parent low at the surface anyway, is 982 millibars, so not terribly strong, but it's enough to get your attention with a deep southerly flow across Kodiak Island over Prince William Sound, south central, and into southwestern Alaska. It looks like there is rain falling across southeast. There's some breaks in the clouds again that we noted across the Yukon, and there are patches of snow across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range all the way into the North Slope, where things dry out just a little bit more under the ridge and the influence of high pressure sitting up across the northern coast of Russia. That's giving us a northerly flow coming through the Chukchi Coast and the Bering Strait all the way down past St. Matthew, and it's pushing this very slow-moving boundary down toward the central and eastern Aleutians. As we get into tonight, we're going to start to see more of that colder air wrapping into the backside of the system with more of a northerly flow and availability into this low pressure system here. Things are going to get a little bit colder out across the Bering Sea, and if you've been waiting for ice, especially around the Bering Strait coast and across the Kotzebue Sound region, there may be some improvement in that situation, slowly and surely. One thing we are going to see is blowing and drifting snow. Looks like the winds may stay up around 40 to 45 miles per hour across northwestern Alaska through the rest of tonight. Norton Sound communities may see some snow as well, though there is not a whole lot of hope just yet for a lot of rapid improvement of the ice. You'll want to stay tuned to the marine segment here coming up in just a few minutes. We're going to take a look at a special picture of the Norton Sound region with some interesting information there from the Sea Ice Desk as of this afternoon. Low pressure sitting across the Gulf right now is at 982 millibars. You can see how this pressure pattern is kind of packing in on itself. Those lines of constant pressure are getting closer together. That means the wind has to flow faster, and that is going to grab a lot of this moisture from the subtropics and move it northward into Prince William Sound. We don't have any watches or advisories out just yet for south central Alaska. That could certainly change. One thing we are watching carefully, though, is the amount of snow that could be falling in places like Turnagain Pass and around some of the Chugach Mountains. As we watch carefully the situation as it unfolds, it could put several inches of snow across some of the higher terrain, maybe as much as feet of snow across some of the higher terrain, and with winds and current snow loading there, that could increase the avalanche danger in those regions. So if you are someone that has business out in the backcountry, whether for business and or for pleasure, it would be very wise of you to keep watch on that, especially going forward. A low pressure here is sitting south and east of Kodiak. It's at 974 by Wednesday, so it is deepening and strengthening, and that is going to push more moisture into parts of southeastern Alaska. And again, we're watching snow and wind as a primary concern there. You'll notice we've added in the thunderstorm symbols. That means convection is possible. That means a little more rising air and a little bit more of a vim, vip, and vigor to this storm here. It looks like it could have just a little bit more oomph and perhaps a little bit of added precipitation with that as it moves into Prince William Sound. On the west coast, areas of light snow will continue. The wind should not be as strong as what we're talking about here, but we will have a little bit of a breeze moving through the Norton Sound communities, the southwest coast, and around Nome, as well as areas in inland sections of Norton Sound. And we're still going to be talking about blustery conditions there across the Kobuk and Noatak valleys into the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. As we get into Thursday, low pressure that we saw across the Gulf has kind of fizzled out and been absorbed into the greater flow. Low pressure sitting here across the YK Delta is also going up to about 990 millibars. That means it's weakening. But we still have a steady south flow coming into the south and central Gulf Coast and into southeastern Alaska. So while conditions may be improving for wind and overall precipitation intensity, it still keeps that same pattern in check, and it looks like we're still dealing with another opportunity for some warm and wet air to move north and reinvigorate the overall system. Let's take a quick check in temperatures there. Across the interior tonight and early tomorrow morning, low to mid-teens, 0 in Northway, one of the colder readings there. Mid to upper 30s in southeast, 5 below in Arctic Village, 5 to 20 below across the North Slope, 17 in Nome, 20s and 30s for Southwest, 37 in Kodiak. High temperatures for your Wednesday look to be fairly mild, generally south of Fairbanks, low to mid-30s, south central from Talkeetna all the way down to Kenai, lower 40s there, 42 in Portage, 42 around Kodiak, mid to upper 30s for Southwest, King Salmon and Dillingham nearing 40, 31 in Nunivak Island, 14 around Gamble, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Chain. Southeast, you'll look at temperatures in the upper 30s to about 40 degrees.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And moving on to your aviation forecast, we expect to see fairly widespread IFR from just about Nome all the way down through St. Lawrence Island and the eastern coastline there through the YK Delta, just outside of most of Bristol Bay's inland areas. So from Cape Newenham southward and then across the Alaska Peninsula. Out over the Gulf, a developing strong southerly flow is going to bring up a lot more moisture. So IFR conditions are expected to be growing and widespread there over the next couple days. And then across southeast where weather is moving in, we expect to see IFR developing there as we go through your Wednesday morning and across parts of the upper Yukon Valley and the Tanana Valley, and then hit and miss across the northwestern interior around the Kobuk and Noatak Valley. You can see the IFR filling in around the western Gulf by Wednesday afternoon. The front's going to be just right about here, and along that boundary we do expect to see convection. We've got the thunderstorm symbol noted there. Wouldn't be surprised to see some generally isolated lightning strikes. Across the southeast, we expect to see IFR fairly widespread all the way from Haines and Skagway southward toward the Dixon entrance and also around Yakutat. And then for a large part of the southwest coast, Nunivak Island and St. Lawrence Island included, and really the entirety of the Alaska Peninsula, MVFR further west. As we go into Thursday morning, don't expect a whole lot of change across southeast. You'll notice that line of convection shifts a little bit more to the east along that frontal boundary that's quickly approaching southeast. And then IFR conditions across the Barren Islands and into Prince William Sound. North slopes of the Brooks Range should expect IFR, and then all the way down the southwest coast into a large part of the YK Delta. Not so much eastward toward Lake Iliamna. We expect most of the western Alaska Range and just on the western side of that to also be marginal conditions. And that may change a little bit by Thursday afternoon with IFR fairly widespread across the Yukon Delta, stopping just short of covering up most of Bristol Bay. MVFR conditions for most of Kodiak Island, a large chunk of southeast, but you'll notice the IFR regions diminish greatly there, although places like Gustavus and the capital city could be dealing with instrument flight rule through the rest of your Thursday afternoon. Around Prince William Sound, we expect IFR, and then hit and miss across the Matanuska and the Susitna valleys, but just south along southern parts of Cook Inlet from Kenai, Soldotna, all the way down toward Homer. We also expect to see marginal conditions there and around Kodiak Island. Here's a look at your pass conditions in detail now. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal levels of visibility and ceiling as we go through your Wednesday afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we should see at least some minor improvements. So we'll hope for the best here, looking for VFR conditions at the end of the day. Rainy Pass, marginal levels will continue through most of your Wednesday. Windy Pass, also expected to see marginal levels through most of the day. Isabel Pass could see some modest improvement as we go. Mentasta Pass also looking to see at least some marginal levels there through most of your Wednesday. MVFR expected for Tanita Pass as we go through the day, and Portage Pass also looking to be marginal most of your Wednesday. Chilkoot and White Pass, as we saw with the moisture moving in, we expect things to come down to IFR by the end of the day. Freezing levels, not a whole lot's changed. We've got a wealth of cold air in place, but we also have a lot of moisture in place, so conditions are going to be a little more variable because of that. Notice the surface freezing line there, pretty much hugging the Aleutian chain, taking a bump north around Bristol Bay, and then back toward the Kenai Peninsula and right over southeast, but generally on the northern side of most of our villages and towns there in southeast with the 2,000-foot freezing line across the southern eastern Gulf. If you look at icing potential, most of those levels where we have the cold and the moisture meeting up, kind of high up there, 5,000 to 6,000 feet across the north coast, across the Bering Strait community, southwest, and then you start to see some changes out across the eastern chain where the levels go down to about 2,000 feet and above. So colder air coming in on the west side of this weather disturbance that's moving eastward. Across southeast, above 4,000 feet, look for isolated moderate icing potential for you. Here's a jet stream. This will make more sense with what we just saw. You've got that strong northwesterly flow coming in, low pressure across the western Gulf, the main Pacific jet well south of the region, and then you've got low pressure wrapping itself up in the northern parts of the Midwest in the lower 48, and then a westerly flow across the north slope at 55 knots. So colder air is making its way southward slowly, and you can see at 9,000 feet. It's not a direct path. It's coming in from the northwest instead of a due north flow, so it will get colder in the west, but not quickly so. Low pressure across the northern Gulf there has a lot of wind wrapping around at 50 to 60 knots at 9,000 feet. Light winds across the interior, only 10 to 15. At southeast, a strong southerly flow, 35 to 55 knots. Here's our low pressure system again over the Kenai Mountains, 65 knots or so. Southeasterlies across the interior, and north and westerly winds a little lighter there out across the Bering Sea. So turbulence potential certainly there. I would say it is possible to see isolated severe across many of the coastal areas and some of the coastal mountains, especially below 6,000 to 8,000 feet for south central, below 6,000 feet for most of southeast, and below 4,000 feet across southwest.
Just as the sun is part of weather on Earth, it also affects weather in space. The sun creates solar wind by steadily releasing a flow of plasma particles in all directions around it. Sometimes the sun gives off a flash of light and X-rays. This is known as a solar flare. When massive bursts of particles explode into space, we call it a coronal mass ejection, or CME. When a CME is directed toward Earth, it hits the magnetosphere, the magnetic field around our planet that protects us. If the storm is large, we may even get to enjoy a light display in the sky called the auroras. In space, satellites may be damaged, and astronauts should take cover. On Earth, people do not feel any physical effects. We may lose electricity in some areas, polar flights may be rerouted, and satellite services may be disrupted. While these situations aren't ideal, they are rare and fixable. This is why we will continue to study the sun and its interactions with Earth and the solar system.
Longing for more space, open skies, and exotic travel? Then look up, about 30 to 600 miles straight up, at the ionosphere, Earth's interface to space. Nestled far above the clouds but below outer space, this little understood destination invites you to explore its many features. Experience both the weather from Earth and the weather from space. Marvel at the ballet of radio waves and navigation signals, like GPS, leaping through this particle paradise. Sit back, relax, and take in the aurora, some satellites, and the International Space Station as they sail by. And you'll want your camera handy for one of the region's signature features, bright and colorful air glow. This daily show is made possible by the ionosphere's own swarming charged particles, because that's what the ionosphere is. It's all charged particles. During the day, enjoy the sea of particles, freshly energized by the sun. As the sun sets, this particle party relaxes and the air glow thins. Our quieter nightlife lets you gaze into clearer skies. The ionosphere is in constant motion, an amazing effect of space weather. Don't miss when solar storms rain down. The storm separates the particles even more, making this colorful region delightfully more dense in some places and stunningly sparse in others. And don't forget about storms from Earth below. Your weather from back home also stirs up this one-of-a-kind destination. Experience the unique beauty of every season, as changes in Earth's atmosphere, daily and annually, can create pressure waves, changing the ionosphere's shape and density. Venture to the equator, where our particles are packed in lush and thick. Cruise along a magnetic field line and see how the ionosphere's charged material also interacts with Earth's own magnetic field. Don't miss the superhighway of particles zipping out to space and back down to the planet. This unpredictable parade of charged particles can help you unplug and unwind. This is because the crowd of particles can garble the radio and satellite communications from home. The ionosphere welcomes you to discover more about this little-known region. After all, once you've explored this interface to space, who knows how much farther you'll be able to go.
When a star, bigger and more massive than the Sun, runs out of fuel at the end of its life, Its core collapses while the outer layers are blown off in a supernova explosion. What's left behind depends on the star's original mass. A star roughly 10 to 20 times our Sun leaves behind a neutron star. A more massive star becomes a black hole. Unlike black holes, neutron stars are directly observable, usually as pulsars, the lighthouses of the cosmos. Discovered 50 years ago, they are the densest observable objects in the universe. Neutron stars compress up to twice the Sun's mass into a city-sized sphere. Matter is packed so tightly that a teaspoon of neutron star interior would weigh more than 1 billion tons on Earth. Still, the nature of the ultra-dense matter in the cores of neutron stars is unknown. Because neutron stars pack so much mass into such a tiny volume, they produce gravity strong enough to bend the light they emit, distorting their appearance in a way that enables the mass and size of the star to be measured. Scientists cannot reproduce the extreme conditions in and around neutron stars on Earth. They must look into the galaxy to answer decades-old questions about extreme matter and gravity. NASA's Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer mission, or NISA, will make X-ray observations of neutron stars from its perch on the International Space Station. It will give astronomers more insight into these mysterious objects, helping determine what is under their surface. A multi-purpose mission, NISA includes a technology demonstration called Sextant. It will analyze NISA's observations to validate the use of rapidly rotating neutron stars as navigation beacons for travel in deep space throughout the solar system and beyond.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice update. Here's a picture of Norton Sound. You can see Golovin here and Nome. I have circled in red for your viewing pleasure there. You can find this image on weather.gov/Anchorage/ice tonight under other images. But what I wanted to tell you about was that a lot of the ice across the northern part of Norton Sound has pulled away from the coast, and you've probably seen pictures on social media from this event. What we do know is that we are starting to see some new ice grow out across the western end of the Sound, and over time we'll start to see that move into the eastern Sound as colder temperatures arrive. We expect to see that shore-fast ice for about the next week or so, though it's going to be pretty unsteady and unstable. So be careful if you're trying to move across the shore-fast ice, but we do expect some new ice to grow here in the coming week or so, should conditions continue to favor that again. So look for new ice growth from west to east, but it's probably not going to be very thick or very solid very quickly, so pay attention to that. Here's a look at the overall ice edge. You can see there's still marginal ice here across the Sound, but as we just saw, that is pretty sparse across the Norton Sound region itself. A lot more highly concentrated ice across the Bering Strait down towards St. Lawrence Island, and then a lot of marginal ice all the way down into the Kuskokwim Delta and across Cook Inlet. A quick check of the winds now across southeast, and we see winds coming up from the southeast across the outer coast. About 40 to 50 knots there as we get into tomorrow afternoon. You can notice the core of the wind still out over the Gulf. The winds across the Northern Canal, 10 knots, about 2-foot seas there, and stronger gusts developing inside of Stevens Passage to 40 knots with a 5-foot sea. As we get into Thursday, those winds will come in with a southwesterly component, about 20 knots there. 14 to 15-foot seas are expected, 2 to 6-foot seas on the inside, 15 to 25 at their highest rates there. Southeasterlies inside of Clarence Strait with 6-foot seas. Across south central northeasterlies come up to 35 knots inside of Prince William Sound with a 9-foot sea, 20-foot seas outside of Cordova and Hitchinbrook entrance with an easterly flow up to 50 knots. 22 to 23 footers there outside of Resurrection Bay and east of the Barren Islands. A northeasterly component coming down Cook Inlet. 30 to 45 with 15 to 18-foot seas developing south of Calgon Island. For Thursday, that should improve, but you'll still have some stronger winds blowing from the east and southeast off of the Kenai Peninsula and off the Anchorage Arm. Or over Anchorage and off into the Arm, I should say. 15 knots from the south and west, west of the Barrens. Southerlies moving into Prince William Sound, 30 knots there with 17-foot seas, and still holding on to a pretty decent wind in southeast or in Prince William Sound at 30 knots from the southeast with a 7-foot sea. Across the Alaska Peninsula now, we're looking at north and westerly winds feeding into the low pressure system east of Kodiak Island. Northeasterlies in Chillicothe Strait, a 15-foot sea there. 16-foot seas east of the island with 40 knots. And easterlies blowing through Bristol Bay, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. That gradually improves. We don't see a whole lot of change here across Bristol Bay or the Bering itself, but west and southwesterlies develop for the Pacific side, 20 to 25 on either side of Kodiak Island, 15 to 13-foot seas, the highest of which will be close to the open Gulf. For the Aleutians, anywhere from 15 to 25 knots, you're looking at 8 to 12-foot seas on the Pacific coast, 9 to 12 across the Bering Sea coast, and 7 to 9-foot seas, a little bit nicer out across the west with only a 15-knot wind there. Those come up to 20 to 25. You know it couldn't last very long, and slightly lower wind speeds spread eastward into the central and eastern chain, 15 to 20 knots there, generally 6 to 8-foot seas expected as we move through your Thursday. For the west coast, north and northwesterly winds coming out of Norton Sound and then wrapping into Nunivak Island and the Pribilofs, 20 to 25 there with 8 to 9-foot seas expected for your Wednesday. The strongest winds will subside south of St. Lawrence Island from 30 knots on Wednesday to 25 knots on Thursday. A 4 to 6-foot sea there north of Nunivak Island, 6 to 7-foot seas here as you head into the Kuskokwim Delta and the Pribilofs, 15 to 25 knots. And here's more of that north and northeasterly wind developing, and that will help promote more of that ice growth across Norton Sound. Look at east and northeasterly winds coming through the Beaufort into the Chukchi Sea, the strongest of which will be on Wednesday across the Chukchi Sea coast, 20 to 30 there. 5-foot seas south of the Bering Strait and around St. Lawrence Island, looking at 4-foot seas there in the ice-free waters. As that's filling in, that area will diminish. East and northeasterly winds wrapping around the Beaufort and the Chukchi. Not a whole lot of change as we go through your Thursday there. Let's take a quick recap of the weather tonight. Winter weather advisories continue around the Brooks Range, the Upper Koyukuk, the Noatak and the Kobuk Valleys, and the Chukchi Coast there. We're looking at wind and a little bit of snow that could reduce visibility there. That will continue for the west coast communities here around Kotzebue Sound and the Chukchi Coast, probably through about 6 p.m. tonight. But everywhere east of that and upland, you're looking at those advisories continuing overnight. For southeast, high wind watches and winter storm watches are posted. The winter storm watch is posted for the north. We have high winds possible in the north and across the south. That could develop as we go into Wednesday afternoon and into Thursday. Thanks for watching tonight. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.